the news tonight, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mash'al al-Zeben, deputizes for His Majesty the King at the funerals of 2 Air Force pilots killed yesterday in an air crash during a training mission. The UN chief says a peace conference to try to end the civil war in Syria should be held as soon as possible, as the UNHCR announces that over 1.5 million Syrians have fled the country. And 2 bombs explode outside a mosque in the Iraqi city of Bahfuba, killing at least 43 people, the deadliest in a month-long surge of sectarian violence. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. Deputized for His Majesty the King, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mash'al al-Zeben, took part in the funerals of Royal Air Force pilots Ma'and Hesat and Ana al-Khushman, who were killed yesterday in an air crash during a training mission. Draped in the Jordanian flag, the 2 pilots were laid to rest after a funeral honors ceremony following noon prayers. Al-Zeben offered condolences to the families of the 2 pilots on behalf of His Majesty the King and the Jordan Armed Forces personnel. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour stressed the strong relations between Jordan and France, mainly in the fields of energy, telecommunications, industrial, mining, water, education, cultural, technical and tourism. During a lecture yesterday at the French University's Alumni Club in Jordan, Mansour praised France's role in dealing with regional issues, mainly the Palestinian cause. He stressed the need to find a lasting and just solution to the Palestinian issue, the higher interest for Jordan. The Prime Minister also outlined political and economic developments at the local and regional levels, noting that Jordan has embarked on a new political era marked by what he described as robust, genuine and serious reforms. He also reviewed economic challenges facing Jordan and measures adopted to tackle economic hardships. On Syria, Mansour underlined the kingdom's burden of hosting a huge number of Syrian refugees, calling on the international community to shoulder its responsibilities and help Jordan sustain services it provides for the refugees. The French ambassador to Jordan voiced his country's interest to further promote French-Jordanian cooperation in all domains. Several cities across the kingdom saw peaceful protests and sit-ins following Friday prayers, calling for comprehensive reforms and the continued fight against corruption. Demonstrators also urged a revision of educational policies to curb violence on university campuses. In Amman, members of nationalist and leftist parties marched on the occasion of the 65th anniversary of Nakba, expressing solidarity with Palestinians and prisoners in Israeli jails. They called for unity of Palestinian factions to work together to regain Palestinian rights and voiced opposition to a substitute homeland. German Foreign Minister Guido Westerwelle, several-day visit to Israel and the West Bank, held talks in Jerusalem with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and in Tel Aviv with Justice Minister Tzipi Livni. Livni welcomed Germany's opposition to sending weapons to Syrian rebels, saying it would not contribute to the stabilization of the area. German Chancellor Angela Merkel is opposed to European calls led by Britain to lift the arms embargo on Syria, arguing there is a danger that the Syrian president's allies, namely Russia and Iran, could step up arms supplies to his government. Both Westerwelle and Livni also welcomed the efforts led by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry to relaunch the Middle East program, saying a new window of opportunity has opened. Westerwelle was later to meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Egyptian police blocked the Rafah crossing in protest against the kidnapping of Egyptian security forces in Sinai. Barbed wire was placed across the entrance to the border into the Gaza Strip, and gates were closed with chains, leaving hundreds of Palestinians stranded on both sides of the fence. 7 Egyptian security forces were abducted yesterday by gunmen who demanded the release of imprisoned activists in exchange for the men. Yesterday, and while the crossing was still open, residents of Gaza were enjoying Kentucky Fried Chicken, delivered from Al Arish in Egypt via the tunnels. An enterprising company arranged the delivery of the fast food meals to the besieged strip for not a cheap amount of money. However, delivery is not that easy and could take several hours. Here's a story.
A van load of Kentucky Fried Chicken might not be an unusual sight in most cities, but here in Gaza, this is something of a special delivery. These meals cost about $30 each, and they've travelled 35 miles, overground and underground.
We place an order with the restaurant in El Arish in Egypt one day in advance. They prepare the order and we agree on a price. We then send a taxi from Rafah. The driver picks up the order and pays for it, then takes the to one of the tunnels at the border. We have a car waiting on this side of the tunnel to pick up the goods and distribute them.
But things can get complicated. The Colonel's chicken can be held up for hours at the Hamas-controlled tunnels, as paperwork is examined by tunnel committees. Hamas, the group that rules Gaza and promotes self-sustainability despite 6 years of Israeli border restrictions, is not too happy about the food coming in. But as with other goods, such as vehicles and weapons, they are regulating the deliveries and collecting tax. A $30 takeaway is beyond the budget of many in the Gaza Strip, but the smuggler's booty is a real treat for this young girl.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon urged the international community to continue to focus on the conflict in Syria and called on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to allow UN investigators into the country to investigate claims of chemical weapons attacks. Ban spoke at a joint news conference with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Sea resort town of Sochi, where he also met with President Vladimir Putin. Ban praised Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry for their leadership in proposing and organizing an urgent international conference to try to stop the civil war in Syria, saying the meeting should convene as soon as possible. The meeting will aim to include the same global powers that attended a 2012 meeting on Syria in Geneva, but this time would also have representatives of the Syrian government and opposition. Lavrov agreed on the urgency of the meeting and told a joint news conference with Ban, the sooner the better.
Lose this momentum generated by Minister Lavrov and Secretary Kerry. There is a high expectation that this meeting should be held as soon as possible.
And as efforts intensify to convene a peace conference on Syria, the fighting continues in different parts of the country with a rising death toll and new reports of atrocities by both the armed forces and the rebels. Luay Balqar has a story.
2 years into the Syrian crisis, with more than 80,000 dead and millions injured and displaced. Today the rebels attacked an important military base at the heart of a heavily fortified zone in the Daraa, where they are trying to regain ground lost to President Bashar al-Assad's forces. The fighting continued for hours, where the rebels were thrown into the defensive as Assad's troops retook the town of Khirbat Ghazaleh on the main highway between Damascus and Jordan. And the blood continues unabated in different parts of the country. The capital came under attack by Syrian jet fighters, damaging many buildings. The old city of Homs now offers a tour of rubble and destruction, and many historic sites are at risk of being destroyed. In Raqqa, the first city to come under the control of rebels in late February, the Human Rights Watch have found torture devices and other evidence of abuse in government prisons. The rebels facilitated the New York-based group's access to facilities that had belonged to a government security agency and military intelligence.
While in the branches, we were able to see, for example, documentary evidence of the type of cases that the intelligence forces were following. We were able to see the solitary confinement cells where detainees were held. We were also able to see interrogation rooms and torture rooms.
There were documents and other physical evidence that the Syrian authorities used torture on detainees. Human Rights Watch urged local opposition leaders to safeguard a potential evidence of torture and arbitrary detention.
شفت عالم قال عيد أظافره وطالع فوق الأظافر بزوائد لحمية بعدين طالع أظافر منظر بتقول هذا مو إنسان. صار له 8 سنين وعالم صار له 11 سنة وعالم صار له 13 سنة مخاوية 4 حيطان.
The breakup of Syria's opposition into hundreds of armed groups is worsening the dilemma faced by the West as it debates whether intervention would solve the crisis in a country with Nusra Front, now 2 Nusras. One that is pursuing Al-Qaeda's agenda of a greater Islamic nation and another that is Syrian with a national agenda to fight the Syrian regime. Luay Balkar for the news at 10.
In Switzerland, meanwhile, the United Nations Refugee Agency says the number of Syrians who have fled the country have registered with the agency has topped 1.5 million as conditions in the country deteriorate rapidly. The agency officials fear the actual number may be even higher.
The number of Syrian refugees who have now left their country has surpassed 1.5 million. The Syrian conflict continues to have a devastating impact on the lives of those who are forced to flee. The fact that more than 1.5 million people have registered or have appointments with UNHCR sadly means the actual number is much higher. UNHCR has registered close to 1 million refugees since the 1st of January this year. This is about 250,000 people each month. UNHCR has been present in Tartus since early April and is permanently present in 5 cities. The others are Damascus, Aleppo, Hasaka and Homs. Overall in Syria, UNHCR's relief assistance, non-food items only, has reached 860,000 displaced Syrians since the beginning of this year.
And in neighboring Iraq, 2 bombs exploded outside a Sunni Muslim mosque in the Iraqi city of Baqouba as worshippers left after Friday prayers. At least 43 people were killed in one of the deadliest attacks in a month-long surge in sectarian violence. Iraqi police said 1 blast exploded outside the mosque in Baqouba, about 50 kilometers northeast of Baghdad, and a second explosion tore into crowds of people rushing to help victims of the first attack. No group claimed responsibility for the attacks. In Cairo, thousands of anti-government demonstrators gathered in Tahrir Square to protest against President Mohammed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood. They chanted, "The people want the downfall of the regime," and called for the resignation of Morsi. One banner read, "He spoke, but he lied. He promised, but on his word, he was trusted, but he betrayed. And down with the rule of the supreme guide," said one woman, while another vowed Egyptians will revive the revolution they believe was hijacked by the Muslim Brotherhood. And when we come back, plastic surgeons warn that some treatments used to turn back time may be a cosmetic crisis waiting to happen.
عن جد؟
عن جد؟
عن جد مع الغد الكل ربحان. اشترك أو جدد اشتراكك لمدة عامين لتحصل وتربح العديد من الجوائز.
Demand for anti-aging treatments and procedures is fast-growing worldwide. But while individuals seek ways to turn back time, plastic surgeons warn some treatments are a cosmetic crisis in waiting. This report looks at Britain, where there are calls for more control on the cosmetic market.
And breathe out through your mouth.
Turning back time. Mother of one, Hella Petterson, wants to freshen up her looks with Botox and dermal fillers at the Cadogan Clinic in central London. Demand for anti-aging treatments is growing fast in Britain, but plastic surgeons warn fillers are a cosmetic crisis waiting to happen.
Anybody could make a filler. You could put engine oil in a syringe and sell it now, and it's legal, which is ridiculous. So it should come under the same body that's looking after implants. There are all these very Entrepreneurial people out there who are making the best of the situation. They're making a lot of money.
From breast implants to facelifts and fillers, the cosmetic surgery business is booming in Britain. Sales hit a total of £2.3 billion in 2010. They're forecast to rise to £3.6 billion by 2015. Plastic surgeons say European regulation is lax and products don't have to meet the standards required by the Food and Drug Administration in the US.
The FDA is a much better body in this respect, and so there isn't the problem with fillers in the States because they don't approve them. You know, there are these three different types of fillers. There's the ones that dissolve away, the ones that are semi-permanent, those that are permanent. In the States, we only have those that, they only use the ones that dissolve away, and it should be the same here.
The trial of the makers of PIP breast implants has just ended in France. The firm was run by Jean-Claude Mars. He admits making substandard silicone implants. The scandal triggered a global health scare and led to a British government review of the cosmetic surgery industry.
I'm a little concerned about these lines that are here.
Plastic surgeons say the review didn't look into fillers, which can have terrible consequences if injected wrongly. BARPs are calling for fillers to be reclassified as medicines, needing a prescription and to be injected by a doctor.
A collection of more than 50 pieces and artifacts that once belonged to Iveta Perón are heading out on a tour of major Latin American cities. The exhibit, 60 years after her death of cancer, is touring in a bid to take the history of Perón's life to the world. The collection, loaned from the Buenos Aires Museum, now headed to Sao Paulo. On display in the Iveta Passion and Action exhibition is a large collection of paintings, photographs, personal items, dresses, shoes, hats and jewelry that once belonged to the historical figure. An actress, Iveta married a late Argentine President Juan Perón and was adored by many Argentines for helping women get the vote, securing labor benefits for the working classes, and building hospitals and orphanages. Though he announced yesterday that he will be retiring from football at the end of the season, David Beckham will, however, feature in tomorrow's Paris Saint-Germain match against Stade Brest. Speaking to reporters, PSG coach Carlo Ancelotti said the football world lost a fantastic player, a fantastic professional, lost a good man, but he believed Beckham took the right decision. He added that it was always a delight to work with him. Meanwhile, the chairman of PSG club said hopeful that Beckham would remain involved with the team in some capacity. The comments by Nasser Al-Khalifi came as the club extended their shirt sponsorship deal with Dubai airline Emirates by another 5 years. Mark Cavendish of Britain won his second successive stage and fourth of the 2013 Giro d'Italia. He finished the 254-kilometer race in a time of 6 hours, 9 minutes and 55 seconds. Giacomo Nizzolio of Italy came in second, followed by Luka Mesjec of Slovenia in third. However, Vincenzo Nibali of Astana remains in the overall lead. And finally, a look at the weather. Pleasant but partly cloudy tonight with southwesterly light to moderate winds. As for tomorrow, relatively hot conditions are expected as temperatures rise with the appearance of some high clouds, while winds will be northeasterly to moderate. Down south in the Gulf of Aqaba, hot conditions, while winds will be northerly moderate and the seas calm. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, his reminder of the day's top stories. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mash'al al-Zabin, deputizes for His Majesty the King at the funerals of 2 Air Force pilots killed yesterday in an air crash during a training mission. The Chief says a peace conference to try to end the civil war in Syria should be held as soon as possible, as the UNHCR announces that over 1.5 million Syrians have fled the country. And 2 bombs explode outside a mosque in the Iraqi city of Ba'quba, killing at least 43 people, the deadliest in a month-long surge of sectarian violence. And with this, we come to the end of the news. I'm Ali Tuqan. Thank you for watching us. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.